It's the War Hipster, coming at you with another special, god-sized Age of Sigmar painting tutorial. Yes, today we are painting Kragnos. Look at how angry he is. And well, he should be. He's a god of destruction. I'm very excited to paint this one because it's a great example of how contrast can work on big miniatures, and also it's going to be very messy and very fun. So, without further ado, we're just going to get straight into painting him. Now, he's been primed in Wraithbone, and the colour we're going to be using first is a roughly 4 parts contrast medium to 1 part Gore-Grunta Fur. This is going to be for all of his skin. Now, the reason we're using the contrast medium is because we want our paint to go further and for it to be able to move around a lot easier whilst we're painting. Because if we go straight from the pot, we're going to get a scratchy effect and we don't want that. So that's why we're using the contrast medium, and it just thins it down so that once we've got the first layer on, we can see if we like it. If we don't like it, we can add another layer in and it won't be too destructive. So without further ado, we're going to get into painting him. Now, the other thing that we're going to do is we're just going to kind of map out how we're going to paint him first. And we just want to kind of complete this in sections. Now, hopefully with all of his armor, this does most of it for us. So for example, there's a section there, there's a section here, there's his chest up to here. So you kind of got from the small of his back right round to here. Similarly on the other side, and we've got like the entire leg piece coming up to here, for example. You just want to take it a section at a time. Now I'm going to start here on the leg, and I'll demonstrate what I mean by this. So I'm going to take this Gore-Grunta Fur mix on my brush, and I'm using a medium layer brush so I get lots and lots of control here. And I'm just going to start. I'm going to pick a place to start, and it's going to be up here right around that chain, just like that. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a painting handle that's man enough to take the job, so I'm going to have to hold this, which means you might get some slightly weird angles as I go, but I'll try my hardest for it not to be too weird. Anyway, the way I'm doing this is I'm always going to be starting up here by a recess where I can. Just going to drop some Gore-Grunta Fur in there like this. So we want to start under here and then pull it down. You always want to kind of start your brush stroke somewhere where you've kind of got a recess for that Gore-Grunta Fur to sit in. So like for example under here and in there is a good example. The reason for this is if you just start like in the middle of a wide open area, if you take too long to complete the stroke, or you don't go back to it quick enough, or your contrast isn't wet enough, you are going to get a blobbing effect, and nobody wants that. I just want to bring this all the way up to that fur. Just missed a little bit there. Just kind of touch at it gently. We're being very methodical, and we're not being too precious about getting this anywhere where we don't want this colour, because if we do get too precious at this point, it takes up time, and time is against you when you're painting a model of this size. And what we definitely want to do is, I don't know if I've already mentioned it, is just want to finish off our sections before we move on to another one. That armpit type thing there. So with that done, what I now want to do, so I've already kind of made that choice for myself. I'm now going to paint the front part of his belly. Like this. As a consequence, because I need to finish the section, we're going to end up coming all the way around. Again, not worrying about getting it on the armor or anything like that. We just want to get it on nice and smooth at this point. And one of the other things that's great about having it as thin as we've got it is that if we do have a pool and we catch it quickly enough, you can just get our brush in there and move it around. Or indeed absorb it. Now this leg's quite useful because we've got that piece of armour just there. It's kind of a break. Just missed a tiny little bit there. And gently use the tip to add that back in. We've got a bit of a pool back here, so I'm just going to rest my brush there for a second to just absorb it, and then I can move that paint on. And one of the other things that I'm doing that's a very useful technique when painting with contrast is kind of once you make contact with the model, just leave your brush on there. If you can. There we go. Perfect. I'll get that tiny little bit there. Like so. So, I just want to go around using very similar techniques across all of Kragnos, and then we'll come back. And with that done, you should have a Kragnos body that looks somewhat like this, which is pretty cool, isn't it? So, what we're going to do now is we're going to continue with Gore-Grunta Fur. And by the way, I've only done one layer of that Gore-Grunta Fur mix on there, and it's already perfect. So we're not going to do another one of those, but we are going to do Gore-Grunta Fur on its own. And we're going to do this on all of his body fur. Now by body fur, I mean the areas like down here, around his feet, well, hooves, and we want to do it on his chest fur. But what we don't want to do it on is the tail. And his head hair. As you can see, it's already a lot redder. Now don't worry, the box art is a lot darker. We're putting this on as our pre-shade for that. So also there's some kind of tonal consistency between the fur or skin and these areas of hair. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to make a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Cygor Brown mix. And we'll use this in a couple of different ways. And what we also want to do is we want to keep our contrast medium on hand to do just kind of soften out any transitions that we might need to do. But we are also just going to be, well, we're going to be doing some wet banding on the model. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this thinned down Cygor Brown mix and we're going to paint this over the top of the fur we've just added. Like this. And what you might notice, as I've just done there, you get this kind of hard transition here, which we don't want. So what we then do is we take contrast medium out of the pot and we just use that to soften out that transition a little bit, like this, by placing that kind of contrast medium around where the two colours meet. And then you wash the brush again, and with no paint on your brush, you just once again do the same thing, kind of just like feathering at the transition between the two colours, like that. So you get this Gore-Grunta Fur going down to the Cygor Brown, like that. I'm just going to finish off this hoof. And of course, if you add a little too much contrast medium, it's not a problem. So you can just add a little bit more of the Cygor Brown in towards the bottom. Just like I've done there. So I'll just do the other side very quickly. Again, going onto the skin, just under there. I might not be able to see it properly because of the camera angle. Then I wash the brush, grab that contrast medium, and where the two meet, I'm just going to soften out that transition on the inside as well. Wash the brush. And then I'm just going to soften it out once more with no paint on. Like that. Perfect. So we want to do that for all the fur. But what we also want to do is we want to do a very similar thing on the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that Cygor Brown and we're going to start here on the slightly smaller section. And we're just going to start painting this all over. Again, just watching for any pooling, because Cygor Brown can be really oppressive as a colour. Like that. Then what we want to do is take a small amount, and we just kind of want to, if you look at the box art, we want to do a little bit of it around here. Kind of around the outside of his muscles. So I'm going to take it down to around about there, like that. And then we're going to wash the brush, grab that contrast medium, and we're going to smooth out that transition. We do that on the skin by kind of starting outside of the contrast, outside of the Cygor Brown, and going into it, like so. Wash the brush, and then once again with a clean brush, you just want to feather out that transition once again. I want to bring it around down about to where the knee is, like so. Now obviously I recommend that you check out the box art for this, just to see how far this goes, but obviously you can do as much or as little of this as you like. And so with that done, you should have a Kragnos that looks somewhat like this. It already looks really awesome. But what we're going to do is we're just going to basically get all the organic elements done, base coated at least first, and then we're going to move on to all the metallics. So on that, what we're going to do is we're going to paint in the remaining fur. Now this is going to be his tail, his head hair, and his beard. Now the colour we're going to make for this is a roughly 4 parts Flesh Terrors Red to 1 part Cygor Brown. And we're going to take this colour and we're going to start painting it all over these areas. Like so. And so with that done, you should have some hair, tail, beard that looks somewhat like this. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to quickly paint in all of the horns. This is going to include these big ones up here, but it's also going to include all the little ones that are kind of poking out of his flesh. Now some of these have got Gore-Grunta Fur on them, and that's okay because these are going to be black. But the colour that we're going to be using to kind of act as our pre-shade is Wyldwood, because we want these to have a more organic feel than, say, Basilicanum Grey, for example. So I might as well just start up here on the big ones. What we're going to do is just going to start painting this Wyldwood all over these horns. Just like this. And with that Wyldwood applied, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some black Templar. I'm going to paint this over the top. So with that done, you should have a Kragnos that looks somewhat like this. He's looking pretty damn awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on brightening up the muscles. And the colour we're going to be using is some thinned down Deathclaw Brown. Now we've thinned it down a little bit more than we normally would. So rather than just kind of a little bit of water, we've got like sort of 2 or 3 parts water. And this is just so it flows off the brush a lot easier. Now what we want to do is we want to keep these kinds of Deathclaw Brown highlights, as it were, or relayers really is what they are. We want to keep them towards the front of him, because the back of him is quite nice and dark. And what we're going to do is, rather than kind of relayering on the back legs, we're going to kind of darken those down a little bit in the recesses and only add highlights there. But here we want it to be a little bit brighter, like the sun is really kind of beating down upon him. And you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So we're going to take that Deathclaw Brown, just a little bit, and what we're going to do is we're just going to pick a place to start. Now I'm going to start here on the knee, because that's the one that's right in front of me, and I'm going to use this Deathclaw Brown to basically pick out that raised area just there, and I'm going to avoid where the shade has settled, just like this. Like that. Similarly on this area. Now, when we did the Cygor Brown blending bit, we don't need to do this over that as well, because you know we've purposely darkened that down. Instead, what we want to do is we want to add highlights of Deathclaw Brown in those areas. So, for example, just in here, you can see where it's slightly darker. We're just going to use a small amount of Deathclaw Brown just to pick out that raised detail like that. But what we're not going to do is kind of layer up over here on this darker patch that we've got. Similarly under here. Just want to add the Deathclaw Brown like that. So with that Deathclaw Brown applied, for that kind of front area. Again, we've not done the back area. What we're now going to do is we're going to use some Tau Light Ochre. I'm going to do a very similar thing, only this time we're going to kind of keep it more concentrated towards the upwards facing areas. Now, I didn't point this out last time, but we are just ignoring the face for now, because we're going to do that separately when we come to do that area. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that Tau Light Ochre, and again I've thinned it down a little bit more than I would normally, and we want to pick out those upward facing areas. So for example, on that leg, what we want to do is we want to add this Tau Light Ochre around the knee like that. Just take it around a little bit further, just like that. And we want to go along there. We also then want to add this Tau Light Ochre along that area of the muzzle, and then this area here is what I would consider like kind of a downwards facing area. So what we just want to do is we want to add a little Tau Light Ochre going along this little section just there like that. Just going to reinforce this bit again, just add a little bit more. There we go, perfect. Similarly on the leg next to it, we've got this kind of entire front part of the leg. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this Tau Light Ochre and start painting it all over that section. And we want to go around like that. We just want to add a little bit here, just a tiny bit just there as well, like that. What we don't want to do is kind of go right under here. So similarly up here on the chest, we're going to add this Tau Light Ochre along there like that. And there. Like so. Again, on his ribs, just want to add it to the top one, the second one, and the third one, but not that bottom one. And up here on the arm, we've got this kind of top area here we want to add it to. Similarly, just there on the continuing that muscle. Then we want to add it to this little bit just there, and then on the pectoral we want to add it coming all the way around. But we don't want to grab the kind of underside of it. And up here on the top, we're going to add something like this. And so with that done, what we're then going to do is we're going to take some Ungor Flesh. We're going to do a very, very, very gentle dry brush. And this time we're going to do it over the whole of his kind of more sort of lighter brown skin. So we want to capture all of his hand, his arm, his chest. His leg. And we also want to do the back legs here, just to pick out areas like the veins. And so with that Ungor Flesh dry brush applied, what we're now going to do is we're going to tie all of those layers together using a glaze. And the glaze we're going to make is a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Darkoath Flesh. And what we want to do is we just want to be very careful, we want to be controlled with how we do this. But what we want to do is, like when I say controlled, we don't want to overload it, you see. So what we're just going to do is going to start painting this all over the top of all of our skin. As you can see, it just really softens out. Our skin. Demonstrate it around here. Just like that. And so with that done, our skin is now all finished, including across the back there. Doesn't it just look marvellous? You've got that kind of dark back blending its way out to our front. Magical. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some Doombull Brown. Say that fast 3 times. We're going to add some Doombull Brown highlights to all of our Cygor Brown hair. Now this is going to be his body hair that we painted. So areas like here on the chest and around the feet. It's not going to be his tail or his head hair or mane, I guess. It's going to be areas like this. And what we're doing is we're just picking out all of the strands . Just like that. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some Skrag Brown. I'm going to use this as a little spot highlight on that fur, so we'll demonstrate on the chest again. So what we want to do is take that Skrag Brown, and just where we've added the Doombull Brown, we want to add a little bit of Skrag to the tips. Of the strands. And so with that Skrag Brown applied, all of our body fur is now finished. Look at that. So what we're going to do now is going to move on and we're going to paint in the horns, all of that black, or at least we're going to highlight them. And the colour we're going to be using for this is Stormvermin Fur. Now let's start up here, might as well, eh? So what we're going to do is going to use this Stormvermin Fur to just very carefully pick out all the edges. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to dry brush some Administratum Grey on the tips of these horns. Now, the reason we're dry brushing is we want it to be a very subtle spot highlight towards the top. So we just want it just like that. We don't want it to be like a hard line. Just like this. So with that black all done, it's now time to move on. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint in the hair around his face. Now, the tail and his mane are already perfect. We don't need to do anything to them. They're the exact right colour that we want them to be, and the contrast has really worked its magic, as you can see, with all that shading and highlighting. But for the face, we want this to be a little bit brighter. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some Mephiston Red. I'm going to use this as a highlight across each of the strands. With that Mephiston Red applied, what we're then going to do is going to use some Evil Sunz Scarlet to add a little spot highlight towards the tips of our hair strands. And with that done, we then want to take a tiny amount of Blood Angel's Red. And we want to use this to kind of just blend all of our highlights on that beard together and make it just appear nice and warm. Just like this. So with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to paint in his face. And the colour we're going to use first is Wyldwood. We're going to use this to add a little bit of depth in the recesses of his face, and also to kind of just introduce some of that extra kind of darker brown features. So what we want to do is we want to use a very small brush here. I want to use this Wyldwood over the top of his eyelids. And his eyes. Like that. We also want to use the Wyldwood as a recess shade. Like so. We want to use a small amount of this to colour in his nose. Like so. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to use some Ungor Flesh. I'm going to use this to highlight the lighter brown parts of his skin. We don't want to highlight the wildwoody areas. I'm going to do that with a different colour in just a sec. And then next up, we're going to highlight those wildwoody areas, so around his eyes. And the colour that we're going to use is Karak Stone. And with that done, we're then going to take some Volupus Pink. I'm going to use this to colour in his tongue and his gums. And with that done, what we then want to do is we want to take some Screaming Skull and we want to use this to colour in the teeth. As well as pick out his eyeballs. Just like that. And so with that done, what we're then going to do is we're going to take some Skeleton Horde. And we're going to use this over the top of his teeth. And with that done, we then want to take some Magos Purple. I'm going to effectively stipple this on to his bottom lip. And we just want to kind of build up the colour. Just being really careful not to get too much. And with that Magos Purple applied, then going to take a tiny amount of Pink Horror. Going to add this as a little kind of a spot highlight around that bottom lip. Just adding little dots of it all the way around. And then next up, I want to use a tiny amount of Emperor's Children to highlight the tongue. And also just add a little bit more brightness into that bottom lip, just around the front. Just like that. So with that done, all that's left to do is the eyeball. I'm going to take a teeny tiny dot of Black Templar. I'm going to add this right in the middle. Just like that. And so with his face done, we've actually accomplished a huge amount of Kragnos. So, as you can see, all that's left to do now is to work on all of his chains and metallic parts. Now, they have got this lovely turquoisey verdigris style that they've decided to go with for Kragnos, and well, we're going to show you how to replicate it now, and it is very, very easy. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take some Iron Hand Steel. We're going to pick a place to start, and I'm going to start here on the shield, and we're just going to start painting this all over these details. Now, it's pretty much everywhere that we haven't painted. There's a couple of little golden trinkets here and there, so areas like this little thing hanging off of the shield and these things here, but for the most part we just want to get this iron hand steel all over all these metallics. We can pick out the gold details a little bit later. So for now, you just want to go around like this. And then we'll come back. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to shade all of that silver. As you can see, there's a lot of silver. I've left a lot of the trinkets as they are for now because we're going to do the gold a bit later. So we're going to shade all that silver. Now I know what you're expecting me to go straight in with that kind of turquoisey finish, but we're not going to do that because we want to kind of, it's quite a dark turquoisey finish that we've got. So what we're going to do is we want to make a roughly 8 parts contrast medium to 1 part black Templar mix. And we're going to add this all over the top. So I'm going to start here on the shield once again. We're just going to start painting this all over. You want to watch for any really dark pools, because we don't want that. What we're doing is we're just basically weathering the model before we add the kind of verdigris. Just like this, and the black Templar gives us quite an oily, gloomy finish. And so with that done, our Kragnos is looking super weathered. So what we're going to do now is going to dry brush all of that metal with some Stormhost Silver. Now I'm using a brand new STC brush for this, small dry. And this is because I want lots of control, because as you can tell, a lot of this detail is on the areas that we've already finished. So we're just being very careful as we go with the Stormhost Silver. We want to have plenty of control here, because when we start to dry brush the areas on his body, we just want to be nice and careful as we do that. As you can see, that Stormhost Silver is brightening that up nicely. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Just get as much of it as you can. If there's anywhere that's a little too small for you to get to, or you don't feel confident enough to do it with the dry brush, you can just use a bit of an edge highlight instead. The main thing is that we just want to catch all of these edges with the Stormhost Silver in preparation for the next part. And so with that done, Kragnos is already looking really cool, but we are now going to add that turquoisey verdigris, and the colour we're going to make is a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Terradon Turquoise, and then we're just going to start painting this all over the top. Of our Iron Warriors. Not Iron Warriors. Iron Hand Steel. That's the colour we've used. It's just already looks perfect. Don't you just love contrast? As you can see, we've done it across all of the armour, and I thought it actually should probably demonstrate the weapon because it is slightly different. Now we're still using the same mix of Terradon Turquoise, but what we want to do is we want to kind of concentrate it on the handle, but not all of the handle. So we want to get it all over here. Like so. And then on the kind of ribbed areas, we want to get this Terradon Turquoise over that. We want to just avoid the kind of silver bands in between. It doesn't matter if you get a little bit of this on there, that's okay. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. And indeed, across all of your armour, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. If anything, it gives it a little bit more variation if it isn't. Just finishing off these sections. Like that. And then what we also want to do is we want to go up this part of the handle here. I want to get it over these spikes as well. We want to come up to around about there, like that. Get it on the rings. Again, doesn't have to be 100%. Like that. And then what we want to do is we just want to add a little bit of it around this central area. And just a little bit like this. Then we can add it around the outside as well. Like so. You just want to do the same thing on the other side. And so with that done, as you can see now, the weapon, the armour, it all looks pretty fantastic. But what we are going to do now is we're going to take a little bit of the shine out and also just add a little bit more weathering. The colour we're going to make is a roughly 4 parts contrast medium to 1 part Basilicanum Grey. Effectively, you just want to pick some areas that you want to be a little bit darker. So for example, this one down here, I just want to add this Basilicanum Grey over the top. Like that. Similarly, I think around here, just want to add a little bit of this Basilicanum Grey. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to add this over the top of the weapon head. As well. A little bit coming down as well. So you just want to go around like this, adding it where you please. And then we'll come back. So I was halfway through recording this step and then it turned out I didn't have any storage available, so I've already started on it, but I'm going to recapture it now so that we don't just lose the footage. So what we are doing is we are just going to brighten up the rune on the front of his shield. Now this is, well, it's not really a rune, it's a design of him. This is Kragnos, and this is a mountain that he was trapped under for a long time. So we're just going to kind of brighten that up, and what we're doing is we're making a glaze of sort of Sybarite Green, but with loads and loads of water in it. So like 6 or 7 parts water. And what we're doing is we're just going to very carefully build this Sybarite Green colour up in places around that design. Now we don't want this to be perfect, but we effectively want to kind of brighten it up whilst also kind of matting down how shiny this part is. Now, you don't have to do it on all of it. This is really up to you how much of this you want to do. So I did 2 passes eventually, so I built it up and I kind of just concentrated it around the areas where I wanted it to be a little bit brighter. So because what I want to do now is I want to highlight these areas, and I just want to add, this is basically like a little spot highlight for the shield, and the colour is Gauss Blaster Green. So what we're doing is we're just picking out anywhere wet. We've added kind of a higher concentration of that Sybarite Green glaze. And so with that done, our shield is finished. So what we're going to do now is going to move on and paint in all of the gold details, and the colour we're going to be using is Retributor Armour. Now there aren't loads of gold details, they're all scattered about though, so what we're just going to do is we're going to pick out all of our little trinkets. So just this one just here. And this one here. Just like this. I've also got these ones in his beard, which I'm going to do now because I don't want to forget about them. And with that done, we're then going to take some Skeleton Horde. I'm going to use this to paint in the, I guess they're like teeth. teeth trinkets. With that Skeleton Horde applied, we're now going to take some Basilicanum Grey. We're going to use this to shade all of our gold. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is going to highlight all of that gold using some Canoptek Alloy. So we just want to pick out the edges in each of our little trinkets. But what we can also do is just in certain areas, we can add just a little bit of this Canoptek Alloy to some of the trim. For example, just round here on the shield. Just like that, and it just breaks it up a little bit. It just adds kind of like a little spot highlight in amongst all of that turquoisey oxidized metal. And with that Canoptek Alloy applied, all of our metallics are now finished. And he looks absolutely stunning. It's not often, well, it is quite often actually, that I look at a model and just go, yeah, I've done a good job. So what we're going to do now is just going to quickly finish off those fangs before we move on to that base. Now these four, what we're going to do is just going to take a tiny amount of Wyldwood, not very much at all. We're just going to add it towards the base of each of these teeth. Just like this. Add a little bit more up here. And with that done, we're then going to take some Screaming Skull. I'm going to run this as a little highlight just down the middle of those claws, going from where we've added that Wyldwood down to the tip. Just like that. And so with that done, Kragnos, the end of empires, is now finished. Look at how glorious he is. So all that's left to do is that base. And well, we're going to get started on that. So we're going to be using some Basilicanum Grey. Now I've taken some out on my palette. I've just added a little bit of contrast medium. Not enough to make it a mix, just, you know, a little bit to improve the flow. Though arguably you could say it was a Basilicanum 1-to-1 mix of Basilicanum Grey and contrast medium. And what we're just going to do is start getting this all over all that stone. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to kind of buff it out. We're going to smooth out those rocks and also add a little bit of a highlight. And the colour that we're going to be using is Dawnstone. And we're going to be dry brushing it on, but we're going to be doing it in a circular motion. So what we want to do is we want to just pick an area to start, and I'm going to start here on the front, and we're going to start going in a circular motion like this, clockwise, and then we're going to go back over it anti-clockwise. I'm going to go clockwise, and then back over it anti-clockwise. We just want to go like this. All over the base. Well, all over that rock. As you can see, it's already buffed out that rock quite nicely, whilst also kind of still retaining that shadow and shade. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some Wyldwood. I'm going to just pick out the little bits of soil that are hanging out around the base. And with that done, we're then going to take some Skeleton Horde. I'm going to colour in all of those bones. And next up, we're going to use a roughly 1-to-1 mix of Black Templar and Wyldwood to paint in the tree trunk. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some Creed Camo. We're going to use this to paint in all of the foliage. So we've got some vines hanging off of the tree. We've got some grass. Just here. We've got these sheaths of wheat. Just here. And what we're also going to do with this Creed Camo, I'm just going to quickly finish this sheaf of wheat by coming at it from this angle. As we're going to use the Creed Camo to paint in the lizard. And with that done, what we're now going to do is going to use some Retributor Armour to paint in the gold details. Now, on this icon here, this includes basically all of the top area. So this bit going down over the top of this arrow. Here, like that. Let's just finish that off. We also want to paint in decorative features on the sword blade. Like that. We are going to do it on both sides, including up here. What we also want to do is we want to use this Retributor Armour to paint in the little icon here, here, and here as well. And then next up we're going to use some Screaming Bell to paint in this section of the idol. Going down to around about there. With that Screaming Bell applied, what we're then going to do is we're going to paint in the sword handle, the sword blade, and the remaining areas on the idol with some Iron Warriors. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to use some Fyreslayer Flesh. We're going to use this to shade our gold and our Screaming Bell. And next up we're going to use some Basilicanum Grey to shade the Iron Warriors. So with that done, it's now time to add some highlights to the base, and we're going to start with the stone, and the colour we're going to be using is Administratum Grey, and we're going to be dry brushing this on. And we want to be much gentler than we were before, because we're not trying to kind of buff it out and brighten it up. We're just trying to catch the edges of all that stone. Just be very gentle. And with that done, we're then going to use some Canoptek Alloy to highlight our gold and our Screaming Bell. And with that done, we then use some Iron Hand Steel to highlight the silver. Just like that. And with that done, just before we highlight the bones and things and the tree trunk, it's all going to have the same dry brushed highlight. It's going to be the same dry brushed highlight that we're going to put on the negative space once we put our texture paint on. So that's what we're going to do now. The colour I'm going to use is Astro Granite, because I really like the slightly flatter style that they've gone for on the product photography. But of course you can do this any colour that you wish. And with that done, just so it matches up with the soil that we've already painted in, just need to add a little bit more bendiness into my medium shade brush. What we're going to do is we're going to use some Wyldwood. I'm going to use this all over that Astro Granite that we've just applied. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to use, you guessed it, Tyrant Skull. Probably my most used paint. What we're going to do is we're going to dry brush all of that soil with this colour. We're going to dry brush all of our skulls. We're going to dry brush a few patches of the stone with it as well. This is just our unifying dry brush that pulls the whole thing together. I'll just never get over how good Tyrant Skull is as a paint. I've added some tufts to the base and it looks incredible. So all that's left to do is to paint in the rim. You can do this any colour that you want, but I'm going to be doing this one with Steel Legion Drab. I haven't done that in a while and it always looks nice. And I just kind of feel like it.
Fear him, mortals, for the end of empires and the doom of mortals has come. Yes, Kragnos is finished. And look at him. The model's beautiful. The paint scheme that GW came up with for him is fantastic, and to be able to replicate it pretty easily with contrast paints is just an absolute joy to do. Doing a model like this is always fun. There's lots of organic textures, and all of that kind of metallic armour is just so recessed and lovely. It's like it's not smooth, flat armour panels like power armour, which can be tricky to do, particularly on larger models. But with him, it was just absolutely a joy, and I'm so pleased with how it's come out.
If you enjoyed this video, you love the channel, and you'd like to support me further, like these legends and bosses that you can see on the screen before you, you can do so. Head to patreon.com/warhipster or head to ko-fi.com/warhipster. Don't forget to share it, like it, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And to make sure you stay up to date, don't forget to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Happy wargaming.